Hey, everybody. And we are live. Hi. This is Critical Q&A number 500. And I am very happy to be here today with all of you. Put your questions here. Not sure if I spelled that right, but here we go with that. And boom. All right, Q&A box is now activated. So if you have questions for me, go ahead and get them in that question box. And we will have some guests appearing here before. Slightly nervous today, but very happy to be here with you all. Let's make sure we're all good. I'm just making sure I got all the buttons pressed that I'm supposed to be and got everything going the way it's supposed to. Thank you, Rod, for that super chat. Very appreciated. Let us get to the Benson Cam portion of our show before we go any further. There he is. All right, there's our little bundle of furry joy. This was Benson literally about 15 minutes ago. You can see he finally got his hair cut and he is just chilling today. There was not a whole lot of excitement out of him. Sometimes, he's runny and jumpy and very excited. But after his extended walk today, there he goes. Yeah. All right. Silly little boy. Okay, good. Just gives people some time to get on board here as we get going. All right. And let's go back here. Okay, good. Excellent. All right. So let us go ahead and get the festivities started here today. I see you guys throwing questions into the box. That is awesome. We will be getting to those. And let us welcome our first guests. Let me go over to this screen and you can see, hello. There are Mark and Claire Headley joining me today. Hey, guys. Excellent. Good. We got sound, we got video, we're all good. These are the things that drive me crazy as a creator, is all the nerve-wracking things with that. But hey guys, thanks very much for being part of this show. This is my longest running content, is answering people's questions. I think I've been doing this for 10 years now. And it's been fun. It's been a lot of fun doing this. And
congratulations on your 500th episode. That's pretty
nothing. Yeah. It's a lot of questions answered. Thank you guys. Thanks a lot. And I thought, there we go. Good questions coming in, or comments still showing up on the screen, which is excellent. Now, I thought what we might do today, Mark and Claire are going to be with us for about 20-25 minutes or so, and then we're going to have some other guests coming on. So if you all have any special questions for them and me and them, or just them, that's fine too. You can throw them in the box and I will be happy to throw them up on the screen. And we can take those up. I thought I might start while you guys maybe go ahead and do that. I thought I would ask, how are things going with you guys and with the Aftermath Foundation work?
Yes, thanks for asking, Chris. As most people that know Mark and Claire Headley, we have day jobs, so we are very busy, and we have 3 kids. Everyone's good, and our volunteer work for the Michael J. Render Aftermath Foundation is going amazing. We've added a lot of programs over the last few years: an education grant, career counseling program. Obviously, we have emergency housing support for people just getting out of Scientology. We have a lot of projects in the works, shall we say. We've also dramatically increased our collaboration efforts with law enforcement. We work with a number of different law enforcement agencies. So yeah, it's going well. It's something that Mark and I are both very passionate about, as you know, Chris. And yeah, so that's my answer. What's yours?
Yeah, everything's going great. I actually just talked to Serge Obolinski the other day. It was his birthday recently, and we spoke about that. And yeah, we're still talking to a lot of the people that we've helped, and a lot of those people that we've helped. It's years ago now. A lot of those people are doing really good, and they get a little bit of bump start from us, and then in most cases they're able to kind of get going on their own and get their life going. And every once in a while they'll touch bases with us, but yeah, we I don't know how to explain it. Sometimes I feel like this is like a never-ending process dealing with Scientology, and every time I think about one of the people that we've helped, and that, we may have done a video that got, 5,000 views, and they might have been one of those 5,000 people. And then they end up reaching out to us and getting help. So then it kind of gives me a little bit more, puts a little bit more gas in the tank to keep going. But other than that, I mean, I think we may be the busiest we've ever been in our businesses and our personal lives now with, we've got 3 boys, 2 of which are teenagers, and one that's on the cusp. And yeah, we're busy, and we're still working. And even though people might not always hear from us, that doesn't mean we're not doing stuff. It just means we're not doing stuff that's fit for public consumption yet. And we're working on getting it done and helping people so that people can get out and Scientology can continue to grow. So.
Okay, let me see what we got coming in on the questions, because we do have a couple coming in here for y'all. Oh, here's one. George Smiley asks, what is the hardest lesson you had to learn running the Aftermath Foundation?
Oh,
you're starting off with the easy.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, hardest lesson. I mean, there have been so many lessons, but I would say it goes without saying that we knew obviously Mark and I were founding members of his board, and we knew going in that having this organization and this nonprofit operating would make us even more of a target than we already are for Scientology. So, we expected that, but I will say that just learning to navigate the many different things they've thrown at us. I mean, we've had private investigators investigating the Aftermath Foundation. We've had people going to each state. Anyway, on and on and on. There's many, many stories of that. And just making sure that we had everything well addressed, taken care of, and going through that process of learning the best way to do that for a nonprofit is what I would say. I mean, we were helping people for years before the Aftermath Foundation was born. So that part we're used to. We're used to, working with people and helping them. But the organized nonprofit piece is where we had to just be very, very careful and smart about how we went about doing that.
Yeah, I wanted to say, Chris, if you could imagine, well, I mean, you can, but for people that are listening or watching out there, if you have a small business, many people know how hard it is to have your own business and to be your own boss and come up with your own clients and do the work. And just imagine how hard that is. And now just imagine that there's a multi-billion-dollar group that doesn't want you to succeed, and their mission is to make you fail. How much harder would you imagine you'd have to work if you also had that in the equation? So you have to, it's a lot of second guessing and a lot of, game theory, kind of playing out. If we do this, will this happen? If we do this, how is this going to work depending on how we do it? And then trying to be more right than wrong in your decisions. And I think after doing this I mean, we escaped in 2005 from Scientology. So we've been at this for over 20 years now. And you learn a lot from doing it the wrong way. And you learn a lot from doing it the right way sometimes too. So it is what it is. And as long as people are still getting out, we're still able to help people. For me, I think that as long as that's happening on a regular basis, we're going to keep doing it. And if there gets to a point where Scientology's, I think they're treading water right now with all the money that they've got. They're not getting a lot of new people in. There's enough people exposing them in enough different areas that I think that getting new people in is getting very, very hard for them. But they're still getting some people in, and they're still getting a lot of money out of the people that they've got in. So it's a constant vigilance, and doing as much as we can, and also finding out from people that do escape, what's going on and what new things they're doing and things like that as much as we can, so we can expose those things.
Yep. And the other thing I would add is we are just so very, very grateful to the many people who have supported the work of the Michael J. Render Aftermath Foundation. We would not be anywhere near where we're at in terms of the now hundreds of people we've helped without the support of those many, many people. So we are super, super grateful that our work is supported and that we are able to continue doing it.
Awesome. Yeah, I agree completely. I'm very happy to be able to be contributory to that effort. Is one of the things I'm proudest of out of the work that I get to do. So the support that y'all give to that out there is, please know that we don't get to tell you everything, but boy, is there a lot. And it's just, and the help that's given really matters to people, even if they never get in front of a camera. There's a lot of work that gets done that has nothing to do with YouTube.
Well, I was going to say, as you can imagine, being in a cult all your life and having to start your life over, that's probably not the time where you want to be on the internet. Being, all the decisions you're making would be, broadcast to everybody. That might be more of a private moment than most people would be willing to have out there in the world.
Yeah, big time.
What a shame. I think there's a lot of the way Scientology is designed and the way Scientology is sort of engineered by Hubbard is that people that leave Scientology, they don't want to be identified as a victim, because in Scientology, they basically portray victims like as near death, or as low as they can possibly be on their emotional scale. So a lot of Scientologists don't want to be identified as a victim. And so you have to kind of convince them they're a survivor. They're not a victim, they're a survivor. And getting out and getting their life started over is a survival a characteristic, not a victim characteristic. And once you kind of switch their mindset or get them to realize that we're doing a new thing, we're not part of that anymore, we're doing something else here. Sometimes you can really kind of get them to get on board and get it going again. And it is what it is.
Yeah. To add to that too, as you, Chris, know well, and as we know, Scientology puts so much weight on their labels, and that is part of the process of getting out. Just like Mark's saying, they don't want to be a victim. They also don't want to be an enemy, and yet. I always say the only power those labels actually carry is whatever power you grant them. So the minute you take back your freedom, you take back your rights, you take back your voice, you're well on the way to recovering or starting that path of recovery from Scientology.
Yeah. 99% of the world doesn't give a hoot about Scientology or what they think you are, or what they say about you. And so if you just kind of discount anything that Scientology says as, not helpful, then you can kind of.
Yeah, big time. All that anti-psych stuff they have. I mean, it really sticks with people for a long time.
It does. Ironically, L. Ron Hubbard died with psychiatric drugs in his body. So
right.
Like the ultimate hypocrisy exists all the way from the top of Scientology all the way to the bottom. The things they hate, they don't have problem taking all that psychiatric medical pharmaceutical money from their donors. But on one hand, they say, let's get rid of these guys. And on the other hand, it's funding all their operations. So it's sort of like,
exactly. Right. All right. We have another one that came in. I think you guys will enjoy. This is from Angry Chode. What do you predict will happen to Scientology in the next few years? Is Scientology still shrinking? What kind of an effect do the ex-Scientology YouTube channels have on Scientology's membership and on recruitment? What do you think?
Scientology will absolutely continue shrinking. Public awareness of the actuality and the reality of what Scientology is only going to continue increasing. And there are so many things coming that, will continue that trend. That's my short answer. And I have always said every voice counts. So every person who's ready to speak out and share their story, absolutely, that is very, very important. And only, like I said, continues to accelerate public awareness. Now, if somebody is or were to be curious about Scientology, they'll go to Google. And so that prevents a lot of people from getting in. I think any perspective of new people going in is probably more curiosity. Like, really, is it really as bad? Well, yeah, it is as bad as we've all experienced. So, but they, as Mark said, they amassed a lot of resources. So, might take a bit, but the trend will only continue from here, shrinking.
Yeah. There's an idea that they're going to become much more cater much harder, much more specifically to, the very rich, the whales, and really, really focus on that because of the fact that a lot of people just can't afford Scientology anymore. Out of what was their demographic of middle class, now, not so much. With $4,000, just $4,000 per intensive, people just are priced out of it.
Yeah, and also the risk reward scenario doesn't really add up these days. When you go like, I'm going to pay this much for this, and what am I going to get? There's not a lot of evidence there, and there's enough things out there in the world saying don't do it. I think you're absolutely right about the catering to the wealthy donors, because that is really, they've really switched over to that model more and more over the past decade or two. I mean, even when we were there, that was definitely that strategy was in full force. Let's just make as much money as we can. Don't worry about the doing courses in Scientology and the counseling. That is all I wouldn't even say that's even second tier. That's like fifth or sixth tier activities now. It's doing events, getting money. The events are what make the whales think that their money is doing something, and the money is what's paying for the events. And also the amount of people that they have helps the donors when they say, oh, look at all these people that we have. But the more the donors see that, we're not filling up the smallest event venues anywhere in the world. How can we have millions of people if we can't even round up 10,000 to show up for an event? So I think those things are, you're seeing, on the back end, we're seeing a lot of people that are leaving, and they're not all doing it publicly, but there's a lot of people that are leaving, and they kind of just, they play along to stay with their family or, you know, their businesses or whatever it is that they have a Scientology connection. They just keep quiet about it, but they're not giving them any money and they're not showing up to the Scientology facilities, but they're not making a giant public announcement about it. And I think at a certain point, a lot of those, I think most people refer to them as under the radar Scientologists. They've left, but they're just kind of flying low and not making any trouble, so nobody notices that they left. I think you're going to find Scientology is going to find out they have a lot more of those than they realize.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I a couple of years ago, I was sort of just guesstimating, really just kind of pulling the numbers out of whatever. But I was thinking that it's, I don't know, maybe 50-50 as far as like as who's left is your hardcore, real, true believers, you know, and then the other half is the family and friends of those people who just don't want to lose those friends and family. So they play along to get along, you know?
Yeah. That's always been built into the DNA of Scientology, is that you cannot be honest or truthful about your experiences in the risk that you might lose your family. So there is a lot of kind of baked in, everything's wonderful, even though you're like, I cannot wait till I don't have to worry about these guys.
Yep.
Exactly. All right. One more for you on a personal note, maybe. And this is from ex-Scientologists. One of the things I wanted to learn about in Scientology was about how to navigate the theta world and not be compelled to do the cycle of life over and over trap. How about you? What were your guys' thoughts about that?
Well, so that's a really broad. I'll just say, look, when I left Scientology, I was born into Scientology. Obviously, most people know that. I spent the first 30 years of my life in Scientology. The moment I escaped, that was the first moment when Scientology became a choice for me. And the moment it was a choice, I decided I wanted nothing to do with it anymore. I have read so many books. I've gone to therapy. I've done many, many different steps on this path to recovery. And so in terms of the deep, dark secrets of the universe, I just know I'm going to make the best of the life that I have right now in front of me. And whatever comes next will come next. That's my answer.
There we go. Excellent. All right, let's pop that off of there. And cool, guys. Sorry about the sound issues, folks. I think I might know what's going on, but we'll see if we can fix that in between. Mark and Claire, I want to thank you guys for being part of this today. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Good luck with the rest of the show, and congratulations on the achievement of 500 of these things. And I have no doubt that at least someone has been helped by these things, and many more will be as well. So we appreciate everything you do.
Thanks.
And like Claire said before, every voice counts. And we appreciate you.
Awesome.
Thanks for having us, Chris.
Thanks, guys. All right. Bye-bye. All right. Let's go back over here and let me just take care of them on the Zoom. And then we will, let's see here. There we go. Good. So back to that. Hi, John.
Hi, Chris.
I'm having a few little sound issues as well. So I've got you on mic, and hopefully that will be good for what we are doing.
Yeah.
Welcome to my 500th episode of Critical Q&A. You would think after 500 episodes, I would have some of this live stuff figured out, but maybe not. Anyway.
Oh, in the next 500, possibly.
That's right. So John Atack has been, let me just intro here in case somebody at some point in the future is turning this on and doesn't already know. John and I have done probably something like 30 shows together over the years. And John has been somebody who has been absolutely foundational and instrumental in my own personal recovery and in the recovery of so many people out there through his book, A Piece of Blue Sky. Let's sell these people a piece of blue sky. And through Opening Minds and the work that you do to educate about thought reform and cult influence and control and all of the rest. So, so John's always got this very, very special place in my heart as one of my dear friends.
Thank you, Chris.
Yes. Just don't know how else to put it. So I thought I might see if anybody had I'm going to throw a couple questions at you. Yeah, that we had come in. I have a question. I want to ask you the same question that the Headleys answered a few minutes ago, because I'm curious what your answer will be to these. You down?
Yeah, of course, John.
Okay, so Angry Chode, I'm going to ask his questions here. He asks, what do you predict will happen to Scientology in the next few years? Is Scientology still shrinking? What kind of an effect do the ex-Scientology YouTube channels have on Scientology's membership and recruiting? What do you think about those?
I think Scientology, as in the body that calls itself the Church of Scientology, though of course there is no such entity, the Religious Technology Center, let's give it its real name. I think that body will continue to shrink in members, but because of particularly people like Bob and Trish Duggan giving them $340 million, that they can persist for many years. I think they'll probably follow Theosophy, Christian Science, in that they're way past their high point. But they'll linger on for a long time. I think that the many people, since Alt Religion Scientology was founded, which I think was back in about 1993, as people have found strength in anonymity and then started to set up channels, of which there are now so many, I think that is having a significant effect on Scientology. But Scientology is not just the supposed Church of Scientology. There are hundreds of splinter groups and many groups that have been influenced by Scientology. Indeed, if you go into almost any major corporation these days, they will have had some training that has some Scientological essence. I mean, Werner Erhard was the biggest of them, with millions of people going through his course and with specific courses that hundreds of academics did, and hundreds of people in the industry. So I think the effect of Scientology will continue, and we do need to understand it. That effect is largely deleterious. But the institution, the mother cult, let's call it, will continue to shrink, and will just live off the funds that it's made. Maybe David Miscavige will get wise and decide that, torturing people on a daily basis isn't as much fun as it used to be. And he'll go off and live in the Bahamas or somewhere nice and give some of the money back. Who knows?
Yeah. What are your thoughts about this isn't coming in from the feed, but I'm curious, since you mentioned Miscavige there. What are your thoughts about I'm asked all the time, what happens when Miscavige is gone? And I've always said, well, it's a little context. It's a little depends on how he goes out of the picture. I mean, if he's perp walked and goes to jail, that's a different picture from if he, has a heart attack one day. And yet, in terms of succession, or, does somebody take over, or does it all just kind of fall apart? Do you have thoughts about that?
Well, I think firstly, he won't have a heart attack because he doesn't have a heart. Need to worry about that. I think the movie The Death of Stalin is relevant, and everybody should watch it because it's hilariously funny. That once a tyrant, an oligarch, a dictator, once they've created a situation where they do not have an appointed successor, and of course, look what happened to Hubbard. He very definitely appointed Quentin, in the 1960s. He said, there's a policy letter that says Quentin Hubbard will take over. Poor Quentin killed himself because he couldn't take the pressure his father was putting upon him. Then he appointed David Mayo, and David Mayo then became the bird dog in the control room. Then he appointed Pat Brokaw, and then he died. And about a year and a half later, David Miscavige usurped the position and took over. He doesn't have a successor. There is nobody who could possibly take over from him. So it's going to be a matter of, is there another David Miscavige? Is there another savage weasel ready to rush in and grab the files and take over? And there may well be, but it's not none of the people we've seen, because all of the executives of Scientology are very much under his control and incapable of succeeding him. So if you look at the fight between Molotov and Malenkov and Beria and all the people in the room when Stalin died, you've got something like that. There's nobody of sufficient significance to actually take the throne.
Yeah, I agree. I've looked at the more I've learned about the Churches of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Mormon Church, the more clear that pattern of succession and has come. Like, oh yeah, here's some ideas of what could happen. Right? The Brigham Young, and just the number of changes that get made, and how they, and then how they solve the succession problem, because they don't want anybody doing to them what they did to everybody, so they could take over.
Yeah. And Brigham Young is an excellent example, and it shows how many movements go, that they'll very often be started by somebody of a Hubbard type, who I'm pretty sure, as Yuval Noah has said, had temporal lobe epilepsy.
Yes.
So somebody has this extreme personality type, but is not really capable of creating a movement, just as Joseph Smith wasn't, not really. And then you get the successor, the Brigham Young, who can bring everything together, but then will make the compromises. Of course, the significant compromise for Brigham Young was to abandon polygamy, which was a central tenet of Joseph Smith's belief. It'd be interesting to see if somebody can take Scientology over and abandon, well, let's say auditing.
Right.
See how far it goes.
Right.
Procedures and see how much is left with the bizarre cosmology.
That's right. That's right. And in a funny way, Miscavige has downplayed auditing so much. And I was just talking to somebody yesterday about how I don't believe that he actually understands what it is that made Scientology grow, or what it is that actually is at the bottom of the con, which is the hypnotic procedures, the rituals, so to speak. Here's a very interesting question. Totally change topic a bit here, but I'm curious for your answer on this one, John. Lupita has asked, if you could have a candid, no holds barred conversation with L. Ron Hubbard today, what's the one question you would ask him, and why?
I asked him what his essential belief was. And I think I know the answer to it, that he does make reference to it in the famous or infamous OT8 bulletin, that the mission of Scientology is to stop the second coming of Christ. This is the huge secret, made public in 1988, but nobody's really focused on this. So I'd asked him, who did he actually believe in? Of course, he talked about the Empress, and as you know, I've written exhaustively on that topic recently. But what did he actually believe? Because it seems to me that essentially, and Marty Rathbun wrote this in a blog shortly before he disappeared, and he'd realized that Hubbard was looking for apotheosis. He wanted to become a god. And so I wrote to Marty and said, well, if you read Let's Sell These People a Piece of Blue Sky, the chapter first published in 1990 is about Hubbard's desire to become a god. And Marty didn't even have the decency to reply to me. I do find it strange, having written this history of the subject and as yet the only available comprehensive history, there are still people who haven't read it. And, they come to these realizations, these cognitions, tens of years later, because it's just a way of accelerating the process and understanding more deeply to get all of that information. So I think I do understand his core beliefs, but I'd like to hear it in his own words. What did he believe in?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. Basically, actually, pretty along the same lines of what I want to ask him about. Like what's driving you? What's the real motivation here? Because we have very good conjecture. I think we've connected dots very well as to what his motivations were. He wrote them down in the affirmations. I mean, he wasn't. He kind of told us. And of course, the selling point on those is he never expected anybody to see those. Those were meant to be private till the day, all the way to forever. So he was being his real self there, as far as I could tell.
It's curious that he kept them. And it's curious that he couldn't throw anything away. When Otto Roos audited him in, I think it was about 71, he said he found all sorts of bits, scraps of paper, envelopes, napkins from hotels with scribbles on them, and that Hubbard kept everything. Jerry Armstrong, of course, was gifted a box of 22 boxes of material, including Hubbard's baby boots, when they came to, they were worried about the FBI coming and grabbing everything back in 79. So there is this huge accumulation of material. Also going back to the 1938 letter, probably written in August, the so-called Skipper letter, where he's writing to his first wife, and he says his only goal is to smash his name into history.
Right.
So that even all the books that destroyed his name will be remembered. And I think that it's Eric Fromm would point to that as the very definition of a narcissist, somebody who doesn't feel they have a self unless other people adulate them, unless other people know them. So that desire to be famous, I think, grew into the desire to be regarded as the source, which through the power processes in the 1960s and then later through OT8 came to be the desire to be seen as the source of the universe, the demiurge, as theologians term it. Which is, it's a preposterous nonsense. He told Charlie Nairn in 1968, before the camera went on for The Shrinking World of L. Ron Hubbard, when Charlie had said to him, "This is scam, isn't it?" And he said yes. and so Charlie said, a very clever individual. He said, "It must be really difficult for you to hide that all the time." And Charlie, Hubbard was very sorry for himself because of the difficulty of doing that. And then Charlie said, "Why do you do it?" And he said, "Well, it's very nice being able to go to your wife every night and say, we made another $10,000. Now, in 1968, that's a hell of a lot of money on a daily basis. But the main reason is I like to catch the clever ones and reel them in." So I think it was a large part of Scientology was the kind of overweight, spotty 10-year-old getting his own back on the clever kids, on the bullies. And he certainly was bullied. In the Navy, he was bullied as well. We have the record of quite ferocious bullying of Lieutenant L. Ron Hubbard. So I think there was a lot of that he felt inferior, and he felt that he had to somehow assert himself. And it was important to him to command the respect of others and the obedience of others and the worship, ultimately, of others as time went by.
Yeah, I agree. Let's go to another one that somebody has thrown up here, which is kind of an interesting question. Come on. Okay, this was one that I thought you might be particularly well suited to discuss. What with your book on opening minds and the work on that. X-Cyan asks, can you explain the process of being radicalized?
In 3 words.
Yeah, exactly. And keep it brief.
I do seek to explain the process in opening our minds, which was the title of
That's it.
I hope the last edition, the 4th edition, by looking point by point at Omar Khan Sharif, who was radicalized and lost his life to suicide. The process, what fascinated me as I examined the process was that it was very much the same process as involvement in Scientology or the Moonies, in a multi-level marketing group, in a large group awareness training. Wherever you go, this way of giving us some kind of positive experience. We might call it a peak experience. We might call it a sensation of awe, as Yuval Noah does.
Mm-hmm.
Or we might just say somebody gets you high, somebody gets you euphoric, somebody surprises you. I think Yuval has given a very good description of the stages that many people go through, though I don't think they're the stages that everybody goes through. What seems to have happened in radicalization, particularly, is so many of the people that we know about, the 9/11 bombers, for example, the 7/7 bombers here, the Glasgow bomber, they're all highly educated. They're all people who are displaced into a non-Muslim culture and felt themselves to be outsiders, but they tend to have had university educations in the West. And I think that sense of being separate is, or in transition, is very important, that we become more vulnerable when we move house, move school,
Mm-hmm.
move from one relationship to another. And it's not necessarily a negative thing, but I think that once our routines are interrupted, we become willing to take on new routines quite easily. So you find yourself in a new group of friends, and they all happen to be members of the Friends Society or what have you. And it makes that transition easy. And I think there's too much emphasis on the idea of the weakness of people who are recruited or radicalized. It's basically creating an affiliation to something. I know for many people who are recruited to Scientology, and myself among them, that it was the sense that we're living in a corrupt world, living in a world where the politicians are not trustworthy. We're living in a world where special interests and cronyism are significant. It didn't seem to me, as a 19-year-old, that there was anybody who had the vaguest clue about human psychology. When I looked at Freud and things like behaviorism or things like that, they just seemed like nonsense to me. They still seem like nonsense to me. And so when somebody came along, and I started with Science of Survival, which was written by Richard DeMille, of course, not by Ron Hubbard, this seemed like a practical therapy. It seemed like something useful. And you then have that sense that you're joining a movement that can change the world, that can turn around. So you'll find the same fervor in people who join Greenpeace, for example. That we're going to change the world, we're going to make everything better. And that's the first stage. Then there's the sense of self-sacrifice. And of course, anybody who's joined the Sea organization has put aside their right to self-determinism. Scientology is going to give you self-determinism. Now you have promised to follow and uphold command intention for 1,000 million years. So that sacrifice, that giving of yourself to a larger organism, to something that you believe is going to do good. People do that in military situations. People do that in radicalized groups as well. There is something noble about that. It's only when you look at it from the outside and say, yeah, but what you did was thoroughly ignoble, that the consequence of that devotion was something terrible.
Yeah.
Then there's a different perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. There is. I can certainly speak to that.
Yeah.
Oh boy, that's one of the hardest things to turn around. And let me also say, just to comment on your answer, it's a really good one. I believe that it's actually a reflection of our society's lack of compassion for our fellow man, that this answer comes out of. You'd have to be a moron to join a cult. Well, only stupid people do that. This sort of one-upmanship that is played with ex-cult members or people or victims, people who are victimized in some way. Well, it was obviously your fault, bozo, and it's obviously not the person's fault if you understand coercive control and thought reform and how all this stuff works. But I think it's a little bit of a reflection of our society that it sort of has this layer of, that you are ultimately responsible for everything that happens to you. What were you wearing? These questions reinforce this. And I think if we could, tackle that layer of our society somehow, I think that's a much bigger problem. There's no quick fix for anything like that. But I think just the fact that that's there is what helps predators and cults flourish or get away with what they get away with, because people's tendencies are to blame the victim, so to speak,
Absolutely. I mean, it's called by some the third person hypothesis. Advertising has an effect on other people, but it doesn't have an effect on me.
Yes.
It's also called just world syndrome, the idea that what happens to you is your own fault.
Yeah.
It was explained to me decades ago by a friend who was a Republican that fundamentally Republicans are people who believe in self-reliance. And so if something bad happens to you, tough luck.
Yeah.
And we're certainly seeing that at the moment. You then, of course, have the insane idea of karma vipaka, action and reaction. For some reason, we use the word karma when we should be using the word vipaka, but let's not get into that. That for 427 people to all board an airplane at the same moment where they'll all die, indicates an incredible complexity to have occurred for them all to have got on it at that time. It takes away any idea of free will. It means that we're completely living in a mechanistic universe. And I absolutely refuse to accept this. If we think about karma, there is a more moderate Buddhist version of karma, which is to do with your sense of responsibility and your morality. But Hubbard pointed out that something is only a transgression if it violates your moral code. So the moral code is no longer something imposed by what the lords of karma. It's something, so it's some people, if you don't steal, that's an overt, according to Hubbard.
Right.
So you get into this whole difficult area of, are you responsible for your own actions? Yes, you are. Is there such a thing as a circumstance that forces you to behave in a certain way? Yes, there is. And, there are psychologists and situationists who believe, Phil Zimbardo, for example, is a situationist, believing that we only do things in response to what is happening. I'm a kind of 80% situationist. I do think that we can develop free will. I do think that we can become responsible for ourselves. But it's way too easy. I've had a video that's gone to 1.2 million people now on a channel called Lad Bible in the Honesty Box. And I'm amazed that so many people have watched it. But in the comments, and I try to pay attention to the comments, there are a lot of these kind of, I'd never be stupid enough to do that. And you go, so you've never been tricked in your life. You've never believed a lie in your life.
Right.
You are the perfectly sensible human being. And
right.
Did you vote for Boris Johnson or Donald Trump?
Right.
Or whatever. That sense of invulnerability, which I've pointed out often enough, and Margaret Singer before me was pointing it out, those people who believe they're invulnerable are the easiest to recruit. That's what I found as a Scientologist. The people who came up against Scientology and told me how bad it was, it usually took me about a 10-minute conversation.
Yeah.
To sign up.
Oh, we would literally push each other out of the way to get to those guys. I want that guy. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because they fold so fast.
And so somebody in these comments had said, quite succinctly, I thought, Scientologists are losers. And you kind of go, well, Tom Cruise was the highest paid actor in the world.
Yeah.
When you've also got John Travolta, Priscilla Presley, Lisa Marie Presley, Karen Black. But then you've got Chick Corea and Lee Konitz and Al Di Meola for a while. And on and on and on. Nicky Hopkins, who played with the Rolling Stones and The Who and the Beatles. It's not to do with being a loser.
Nope.
You will become a loser, ultimately, if you get into Scientology, as Chick Corea, for example, found through becoming bankrupt because of his involvement with Scientology. But it attracts people who are ambitious and who want to get somewhere, and they believe they're being told something true. And when they encounter someone like Yvonne Gillam-Yench at the Celebrity Centre in Los Angeles, she inspired people to believe and actually to develop their careers.
That's right.
In complete opposition to the attitudes of L. Ron Hubbard, of course.
That's right. It's one of the reasons why her name survived for so long, because there's not one person I've ever met who knew her who doesn't get a smile on their face and just, oh, Yvonne, she was an angel, sort of thing.
Hubbard managed to take her 3 children away from her and keep them away from her. That's how vicious he was.
That's right. That's exactly right. Now, let me jump to one other question that was put here for you, because this is a good one. John, what do you think Scientology is most vulnerable to externally? I'm talking about criminal investigation, YouTube critiques, members leaving, etc. What do you think?
Well, I've said for a long time that I think the focus should be on the rich donors, the whales.
Mm-hmm.
And rather than picketing the Scientology organizations, picketing the businesses of the whales and handing out material to anybody going into those business establishments saying, this corporation, this individual is funding slavery. So getting the message to the people who are actually keeping it alive, because it's not kept alive by people taking services in Scientology. It's kept alive by these immense donations. So I think that's the first part. Litigation is just amazingly difficult. The first case I worked on was in 1984, the later case, and that was successful. I worked on the Wallersheim case. Wallersheim got $9.2 million. I worked on the Mayo cases and on one that got him $2.9 million. I worked on Ben Corridan's case. I think he got about $2 million from that. But the case that perhaps interested me the most was one called Freedom for All in Religion, which was more than 400 people, I think 412 people, had formed a class to sue the many Scientology entities. Hannah and Jerry Whitfield were involved in this. And in 1988, I flew over to LA because the lawyers were going, we've had this, we've delivered this writ 4 times, and the judges every time said, no, this is improper. We've not put it properly. You haven't demonstrated that you have a class of people, and you haven't demonstrated that the people you're suing are a class either. So I put together the corporate structure of Scientology, which had, of course, been reassembled by Larry Brennan. And I was aware of the corporate papers, and I put those into court. And the court accepted that all of these many, hundreds, in fact, of corporations are one monolithic corporation. I pierced the corporate veil, as they say, by showing that Miscavige had signed undated resignations from the heads of all of the corporations in his safe. So he could throw anybody overboard, to use a Scientology metaphor, at any moment he wanted. But when I went to say, well, what makes us a class, or what makes the people suing a class, the only thing I could see, because of the religious protection, so all of these ludicrous claims of supernatural powers, which none of them fulfilled, or you and I wouldn't exist if they had supernatural powers, let's face it.
That's right.
Pretty simple, that one. And this stream wouldn't be working.
That's right.
But the only thing I could come up with was the promise of clear, because that is promised as part of a modern science of mental health. It's not a religious promise. And a few months after I'd done that, and it was very complicated, and the lawyers were cock-a-hoop, it was like, finally, we know what the case is, we know what we're doing. The judge accepted that they were a monolithic corporation. But I talked with Hannah about 6 months afterwards and said, well, what's happened to the case? She said, well, we didn't want to denigrate the state of clear. And it turned out that most of the people in the class action were in fact independent Scientologists.
Oh, wow.
So
wow.
I think that possibility still exists, that thing has been sold to everybody and nobody achieved it, because you say, well, this is the state as described in Dianetics. I will have fantastic IQ, photographic recall of every moment of my life. I'll be immune to colds, viruses, it says so. None of these promises have been fulfilled. So there is something there, but it'd be a hell of a struggle because you're dealing with an organization that's probably got between $2 and $3 billion. Although they've stopped suing people since the Time suit failed in 2011, which is a blessed relief. I mean, I was in about 10 cases directly with them myself. They had a lot of money and I had none. It does make a difference. So I think that while they're not wanting to start litigation, they do have, as Leah Remini is finding out, very deep pockets. And they can keep going forever building a paper mountain of material. So I'm not sure that the courts are way through. I do think that it's really down to governments, not to ban Scientology as Victoria and Australia tried to do,
right,
as the Russians have tried to do, but to look at it in the way that the German government has and said, well, firstly, because there is a duty to Scientology, which is more significant than the duty to anyone else, they will spy on us if we put them into our civil service, as of course has happened and it's been proven in court before.
Yep.
Where the FBI materials were leaked to Scientology in the 70s when they were trying to catch Michael Meisner. So understanding that, but also saying the simple thing is, Scientology is not a belief system. Very few Scientologists can actually tell you what the cosmology of Scientology is. If they want to find it, the only place I know that it's written is in Let's Sell These People Big Blue Sky. And it took me months to work out what the important bits were, because there is no single page that says, well, this is what Scientology is. And that the fragments are distributed, the important fragments, before the beginning was the cause. And the entire purpose of the cause is the creation and effect. Well, that's probably the beginning. And then life is basically a static, and so on and so forth. Those are beliefs, but they're not particularly relevant. What's relevant is the practice of Scientology. And the practice of Scientology is to bring about very good indicators, or euphoria, as we call it, or being high, as we also call it, and a cognition or realization. And that is achieved by the use of procedures that are most definitely and emphatically, by Hubbard's own definition, hypnotic. Hubbard, in fact, cancelled the Book One process a year after he released it in June 1951. He cancelled it because it's hypnotic. That's what he said. Then it was reintroduced in 1977, and it has a thing about fluttering eyelids in the text. So he knew it was hypnotic. I wrote a paper called Never Believe a Hypnotist about 30 years ago. Which goes over his dozens of statements admitting that it's hypnotic. I think there should be regulation of counselling, and there should be some way of looking at those methods which do induce altered states. Yeah. It's very difficult. In this country, we have no regulation. In the US, if you call yourself a counsellor, you need to have a master's degree, which doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be helpful to anybody. It means you'll have a master's degree. Mm-hmm. But the open use of these profoundly hypnotic procedures, which of course were used by Charles Manson to create his family. I can prove that, and I can demonstrate that, and I will publicly do so in the near future. But these processes can be used, as Hubbard said, we can brainwash faster than the Russians. Total amnesia in 20 seconds. But we have ways of making slaves here.
Yeah.
And he was right. That was true. And he did. He made slaves. So those processes which trick people, I think there's an unfortunate thing in Evan Stark's expression, coercive control, because it's not about coercion, which is force, intimidation, or threat. It's none of those things. It's how you can talk somebody into acting against their own better interests. And we need to understand that better. We need to extend, in this country, as you know, we have a coercive control act, but it only applies to spousal partnerships. And if somebody in a couple can do it to the other person, then it means it can be done. And these groups such as Scientology, should be regulated in some way with regard to that. They should also, most certainly, not have tax exemption.
Yeah.
That would be very helpful.
Yeah, exactly. John, thank you very much for being part of my 500th show here. I really, really appreciate it. You popping in for today and answering some questions for some folks. This was fun. And as always, your answers are always entertaining, informative, and educational. So thank you for that.
Thanks so much, Chris, and well done on reaching the 500th Q&A show. And we don't, if you want to go and look up Q&A in the admin dictionary, that's not what we've been doing. And I think you've got Jefferson Hawkins next, so please give him my fond regards. I'll be in touch with him again soon.
Awesome. And I'll be in touch with you again very soon.
Great. Thanks so much, Chris.
All right. Bye-bye.
Goodbye, everybody.
All right, let's flip on back over here for a second. Yes, we do have one more guest coming. But before we get to that, I have something else to show y'all. I reached out to a special someone and let her know that this show was happening and what I was doing. And she sent me this.
I want to just stop by and say happy 500th episode. That's amazing. Thank you for all the work that you do, all the work that you will continue to do. And I love you. So happy 500th birthday.
Let's see here. All right. We have one more guest popping in here. We fly. Hey. There you are. Hi, Jeff. Hey, welcome to my 500th show. Thanks for being part of this.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. For those who may not know, this is Jefferson Hawkins, and Jeff has been on my show a few times over the years. We have had lengthy and very fun discussions about Jeff's history as a marketing executive and manager in Scientology, working directly with David Miscavige many years, and the man who actually is ultimately responsible for the big booming Dianetics campaign of the 1980s that put Dianetics back on the New York Times bestseller list back then. Jeff, right. Yeah, Jeff was the man. And Miscavige never forgave him.
Miscavige hates anybody who can do something he can't do.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyone who is at all competent at the ant base is hated and usually beat up by Miscavige because he has to assert dominance.
Yes, like all bullies, Miscavige just can't quite deal with the fact that he's not always the smartest, brightest, greatest guy in the room.
Exactly.
How silly. We have been pulling in some questions today, and I thought some of these, I'm going back over a couple of them because they're just so good that I kind of want to get everybody's point of view on a couple of these. Folks, if you have questions specific for Jeff, go ahead and put them into the chat here and into the question box, and I will get to them. But I'm going to ask you these, and the first one is... a question from viewer X-Cyan. He asks, one of the things I wanted to learn about in Scientology was about how to navigate the theta world and not be compelled to do the cycle of life over and over trap. How about you? What's your answer to that, Jeff?
That's a pretty esoteric question. I know in Scientology, it's like you're trapped and, you have to, you're trapped in living life over and over again. And it's all horrible. I don't think life is horrible. I think life is wonderful. So I don't have any fear of living life over and over again. And it doesn't feel like a trap to me. So, yeah, I don't know.
Excellent. Excellent. I like that answer, actually. And another one that came in, and I thought this one was, this has always, been thought provoking for me over different times. I found that questions like this, the answers change as I've learned and grown and moved away from Scientology and from L. Ron Hubbard's influences. And this one is, Lupita asks earlier, if you could have a candid, no holds barred conversation with L. Ron Hubbard today, what's the one question you would ask him and why?
Oh, that's interesting. I would probably want to ask him if he really believed in all of his own bullshit.
Yes. Yes.
That's something that people have wondered about. Did he really buy into it?
Mm-hmm.
Or was it just his flights of fancy and he didn't really buy into it? That would be an interesting question to ask him,
Yeah, it would. It would. What were your thoughts about when what was going through your head the first time you saw L. Ron Hubbard's affirmations? Remember those things?
Yeah. No, I saw those after I left.
Yeah, me too.
And I thought it was pretty revealing about what was really driving him. And it shows a lot of weakness and a lot of self-doubt.
Yeah, a lot. A lot. He was a very insecure person.
Yeah. And, it's been said that Scientology was probably just him running his own case.
Right.
Yep.
I believe that there's truth in that. I think, well, he clearly seemed, with those affirmations, he clearly believed in what we would call self-hypnosis. And we know that he was an avid practitioner of hypnosis before he had anything to do with Dianetics.
Yeah.
And we know he was a very self-loathing individual in many ways, and needed, as John Atack pointed out earlier, needed the adoration and attention of others in order for him to feel like he was somebody who mattered,
Yeah.
So I think all of those fit into that mix,
They kind of do. You remember that movie, The Master?
Yes. Yes.
My take on that was that, remember, there were two characters. There was Philip Seymour Hoffman's impression of Hubbard.
Yep.
And then there was, I forget the actor, but played the sailor who he audited.
Oh, Joaquin Phoenix.
Joaquin Phoenix, yeah.
Yeah.
And my take on the movie was that both of those characters were Hubbard.
Oh, interesting point. That's a very interesting point, and not a bad one, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because if the Joaquin Phoenix character was in the Navy,
mm-hmm.
And had problems and so forth, and then the Philip Seymour Hoffman character was auditing him.
Yeah.
That's Hubbard auditing himself.
Right. That's an angle I hadn't actually thought of. The more I'm sitting here kind of going through, yep. It really is quite an interesting, because people have called that movie, a character study, and you have, and Paul Thomas Anderson, who wrote and made the movie, has talked about how he wanted to explore the sort of the codependent dynamic of the master and the servant sort of thing. But you make an excellent point that right in the middle of that, kind of hiding in plain sight, are the opposing, characters within Hubbard's head.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very, very much. And, his antisocial, angry, sort of can't fit in this world, feels different and somehow better than the world, but can't really manage to succeed at all. That's the Joaquin character. And then you have this so confident, so sure of himself, so self-centered, and yet also right on the edge. You start criticizing the Philip Seymour Hoffman character, and he falls apart instantly, right? He just starts falling apart and attacking you, just like Hubbard would. So
Totally, yeah.
Yeah, good points. Hey, here's a question for you specifically from the audience here. Love Food Kitchen asks, is Jeff still doing signed books? My copy of Counterfeit Dreams is looking very well worn after all these years, and I'd love a signed replacement.
I'll sign a book, sure. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, good. How would people reach out to you?
Let's see. That's a good question. And I don't like to give out my email.
Right.
That stuff.
Right.
But if you order a book, just include a note and say you'd like me to sign it, and I'll sign it before I send it off.
There you go.
Here it is. Counterfeit Dreams.
Excellent. Okay, good. Yeah. Good. All right. All right, good. Well, I'm going to go ahead and let you go, Jeff, because I'm going to finish off my show and answer a bunch of questions people have asked me. So I want to thank you very much for popping in and being part of this today.
Happy to. I'm glad you invited me.
Yeah.
By the way, it was great to see you in Florida.
Yes, it was. Boy, there were a lot of folks there, weren't there? That was probably one of the most that we're talking about Mike Rinder's service here, his memorial that we both attended last month. And I just haven't had too many moments in my life that were really as beautiful as that service. So
totally.
Yeah.
Very, very moving, very emotional.
Oh, very, very, very much.
And so many old friends, great people. Yeah.
Oh. It was a wonderful, wonderful experience. All right, Jeff. Well, again, thank you very much for coming around, and we'll talk again soon.
Okay, great. Yeah, anytime.
All righty. Bye-bye, man. Done. Those were my guests for the show for this 500th episode. I hope we enjoyed all of that. I did, and I apologize for sound issues. If I have to download this episode after the live is done, I won't be able to do so until tomorrow. YouTube doesn't let you download a live stream for about a day. But once I can, if I need to do that to fix the sound and reload it back up, I will do so, because I don't want my guests' answers and all of this good stuff to be lost. And I can probably fix whatever is going on. Okay, so let's thank you. All right, so let's now, as we do with our shows, let's go ahead and answer your questions with just you and me, as we and carry on here. The first one, if you, Stuart, and I'm just going from the very top now, and I'm just going to go straight down, all right, as we do. If you had 500 dogs, what would you name them all? Thank you, Stuart. This is what I get for not looking at the questions first. I would, I don't even know where to begin with 500 names for dogs. Dog number 1, dog number 2, dog number 3. All right. Xion asks, do some people want to be led by a cult leader that tells them what to do because of the security predictability of it? Yes, I believe the answer to that is a resounding yes. Yeah. I think it is built into us as a survival mechanism that we organize ourselves in such a way that there is specialization or there is expertise or knowledge, because who of us can keep track of or be on top of everything that you need to know to navigate the world? even in simpler times, even in times when things weren't so scientific and technological and industrial, even going back thousands of years, who knew everything there was to know about all of the places to go, all the animals to go after, what's poisonous and what's not, what's medicinal and what's not, what are all the weather patterns, what about all those lights in the sky, all the things that we have been pondering for literally millennia. None of us can know all of it. So we rely on other people. And in relying on other people, one particular set of expertise we rely on is leadership or wisdom or a knowledge of how to organize. Not everybody can organize themselves very well or organize other people. Some people just don't want to. Some people can't. It's either or. And I think that because of that, we end up with what we now think of or call social hierarchies. And I think that that's why social hierarchies form up in the first place, is because if 8 of us are going to go out to go kill a woolly mammoth, well, who's doing what? If we all just think we're all just going to go out there and not talk to each other and somehow we're going to accomplish a team activity, of course we're not. And so wouldn't it be easier if you had, if you were in a group with like 7 other people? Well, who's telling who what to do? Or how should we do this, right? And I think that's the reason why people want to be led. And have somebody else tell them what to do, is they have their idea of what's important in their life, and leadership isn't one of those things. They have other ideas about where they want to spend their time or what they want to do with themselves. So I think that's how that happens. I don't think there's anything at all nefarious or wrong or corrupt or twisted about the way we organize ourselves. It's our inability to choose the wise among us. It's our inability to see through the charismatic deception of certain people that we get in trouble. It's not because we have leaders. That's my take on it. Yeah. Okay, now that we're back into a regular sort of mode, okay. Yeah, I see that comment there, Lafu Kitchen. If Mike Rinder were still among us, he would have absolutely been top of the list for me to invite to today's show, and he probably would have showed up. Okay, let's carry on here. Okay, Once a Witness Vernon asks, Chris, what do you think about the situation in Los Angeles? All right, so let's move away from Scientology for a moment. I believe you're asking me about the fact that a bunch of ICE agents and police were confronted by regular citizens, I believe it was yesterday, while they were performing their ICE duties. And this may be, I have not been shy on social media, so I won't be shy here about sharing my opinions about what ICE is doing. I am well aware of the fact that we require police forces. I'm well aware of the fact that we require border security. I have no question about either of those two things as a need in our lives. Any nation, any state, is only as strong as it can maintain its borders. Otherwise, it gets overrun by hostile forces and taken over, and then that nation no longer exists. So clearly, borders matter. Clearly, it's important that when people violate the law, that we have police forces in place to correct that, and a justice system in place to deal with how to handle people who won't follow the law. So I'm not an anarchist. And I'm not somebody who wants to tear it all down. I feel like I have a really strong sense of order about how things should be, and I want them to be ordered. I think we prosper and get along so much better in an ordered environment versus a chaotic environment. So I say all of that because I'm not a person who wants to just, rip everything apart. What I have a problem with is the misuse of that power. In order to have a police force, in order to have a military, in order to have a government, you have to give over power to an institution or to a group of people who you're, by necessity and design, you're not in charge of. You're not managing them. Your money, your taxes pay for that service, that institution to exist, but you're not the one in charge of it. This is how we've structured our societies. But when that power that we give over to those institutions or groups or individuals is abused and used in a way that breaks the rules we all agree with, in other words, our laws, or breaks even more fundamental agreements that we have, like human rights, or what we think of as civil rights here, right? The law and the customs and everything in our civilization. When these things are violated willy-nilly by forces that are using violence to enact their will, the police and the military and ICE and other government institutions are empowered to use force and violence to exert their will. We can't have those things exist if they don't have that ability. But when they abuse those powers, when they cross the line over into, now we have the power to rewrite, change, ignore the laws. We don't have to pay any attention to that. And then when those institutions, forces, or individuals are not held to any account, there are no consequences for them breaking the rules. There's no other word to describe that situation but injustice. It's not right. It's not fair. It's not what we agreed to. This has been the basic conflict between citizens and government since day one, right? Is not, hey, we want you to rule us and we need you to, to run things so that we don't have to think about it. I don't want to have, what am I supposed to do about trade agreements with Malaysia? Nothing. I need somebody else to deal with that so that I can get the benefits of what Malaysia wants to send us and vice versa. We need that structure. But when they, again, when they're abusing that power or ignoring the rules on which that power exists, then we have the right to push back. The citizens have the right to organize and push back. And that is something that a lot of Americans seem to have forgotten and are now kind of remembering or are trying to pick back up on. America is an incredibly complacent culture. We are very, very, we don't want to rock the boat. We want things to be very safe and very secure and very stable. And there isn't anything more safe and secure and stable than a cult. Because everybody's marching in lockstep. Like if you want safety and security, give up every power and right that you have, and you can be the safest and most secure person in the world. It's called being in jail, or being in prison or being locked up. You're safe, right? The elements aren't going to get you. The bad guys aren't going to get you. You're secure. You're very secure. But, you're trading freedoms. You're trading your freedom. And there's a point in any society, any culture, in any history book, where the abuses become too much and people have to organize and push back. And all of that is what we saw yesterday in LA with ICE trying to do whatever it was they were trying to do and rounding up so-called criminals and illegal immigrants. There's no transparency or accountability. In fact, we don't even know who these people are because they run around in masks, hiding their identity. This is what I consider and have called, again, I'm not going to particularly hold back on this. I have referred to ICE now as the American Gestapo. I am wholly beyond myself with the abuse of power that we are seeing. Stephen Miller and the people who run ICE have gone on mic and openly stated that they don't give a shit what I have to say or what anybody has to say about what they're doing. And what they're doing is wrong. It violates so many laws and so many statutes, so many things. And it's not right because of that, right? Even if they are taking people who are not legally here, the way they're going about it and the way that there is no accountability or consequences or transparency to those people who break the law. I'm talking about, the ICE agents, the police, is a sign of how complacent we've been, that we've given over that much power to them without even noticing, to the point that now can be so abused. So it's on us to organize ourselves as citizens, because all that power they have still stems from us. We agree to it. We let them get away with it. We watch it happen. We don't take any action to push back or fight back. I'm not for armed insurrection against government institutions at this point. I don't think that's necessary. I don't think that's where we're at. But what happened in Los Angeles with the direct confrontation with ICE agents is something that's brewing, and it's going to continue brewing, and it's going to give our, I'll say, proto-authoritarian government institutions, because we're not in fascism right now, and we're not really in authoritarianism right now. We're not. But we are in what's called democratic decline, right? And so we're going to have to take our democracy back and maintain it as the democracy we want. And I think that's kind of what the LA situation is really highlighting right now, is just how much at loggerheads we are, and how these institutions are going to use harsh language and even harsher methods to suppress people having the ability to fight back. That's what proto-authoritarian governments do. There's a whole checklist. You can just look it up. This is not rocket science. It's well laid out in history, and there are a lot of people who are way smarter than me who have figured out how this rolls out historically. And so that's kind of what's going to happen if we don't do this smartly, and if we don't get political institutions to listen to us and to push back against the authoritarian measures, right? We have economic forces and other social forces at play that have created all of this. Very few people are talking about that, or are coming up with the actual, okay, here's what we can do to turn the tide on that. Those conversations are finally being had somewhat now. So, and I would recommend everybody tune into those. So you know what's up and what we can do about it, right? Because we need to organize. I'm not at all, none of this answer was, let's organize and go kill people. Let's organize and go commit violence. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying we organize to take back democracy by using and organizing for the power that we have in our democratic institutions. That's the power we have. So I hope we can do that. It's a long process. You understand? It's not something that happens in 2 days or 3 days or 5 days or 3 or 4 or 5 months. This is a years-long process, because it's taken us decades to get here, and we're not going back to how things were. So in moving forward, where are we going? Well, we can go downhill really quickly, or we can go and make that grade not so steep, right? And maybe even level it out a little bit. We've got a lot to do, though. But let's not, as one of my favorite expressions recently from Vlad Vexler, who I listen to as a political philosopher, and I agree with a lot of what he has to say. Don't confuse impossible with and hard. hard is hard. This is a hard task ahead of us because we didn't pay enough attention. I say we because it's all of us. Basically since about 1970 when neoliberalism started taking over, right? That's a point we can point to and go, yeah, that's when we really started losing control. Okay. Serious topic, guys. Really is, I know. So let's move on. Young Matador. Hey, Chris, congrats on the 500th episode. Thank you. What bowling trophies will be awarded for those who have watched them since episode 1? I don't do bowling trophies. Sorry. I wish I did have some ability to give all of my viewers something awesome. You get me. John asks, what do you think about the protest on Father's Day? I'm not sure what you're referring to, so I'll have to go look that up. I'm not sure if you're talking about a Scientology protest or a civic one or what that's about. So please clarify. Hey, Hunpuds, is it known why LRH is usually referred to as L-Run? Seems unusual he didn't go by his first or middle name alone. It's almost like he wanted his name to be L-Run instead. No. The only people who call him L-Run are people who are protesting Scientology or who don't like him. Nobody in Scientology refers to Hubbard as L-Run. No one. In fact, I didn't even hear L-Run until I left Scientology. That's just not how he's referred to. He's referred to as Ron. Everybody in Scientology calls him Ron, or L. Ron Hubbard, right? His first initial L stands for Lafayette. That's why nobody calls him L, Lafayette, because he didn't want that. He wanted to be called Ron. That's what everybody in his life called him, and that's what I can say about that. Okay, let's see what else we got here. Xion. Trump has announced with some fanfare the golden age of America. Sound familiar? Oh my God, yes, it does. This is, in the context of Trump. This is just, what John said earlier about narcissism is a really spot on observation of how Trump sees the world and what motivates him, right? You guys got to know he has no plan. You have to know that, right? There's no master strategy. This isn't 4D chess. That's not what he as an individual, that's not what he's about. He's not a smart man. He's not a planning man. He doesn't engage in strategy sessions with his Secretary of State or his secretaries or his cabinet members. He doesn't do any of that. He's not capable of it, really, but because he's not interested in it. It doesn't mean anything to him. It has no importance to him. The only thing that matters to him is this public meter of popularity and acceptance and attention. As long as people have attention on him and are paying him attention, and preferably loyalty, that's the highest grade of attention he wants. That's what makes him feel fulfilled. That's what gives him his narcissistic supply, is another term that's used these days for that. So that's kind of where he's coming from. So phrases like the golden age of America, which is a joke right now, if you look across the boards at our economy, our job rate situations, our trade situations, the situation we're in now in the world because of, the orange wrecking ball. This is the exact opposite of a golden age of America, which is typical proto-authoritarian language. right? Things have never been better as people are literally dying in the streets and being taken into unmarked vans by masked goons and sent off to detention centers in other countries. This is not a golden age. This is the decline of liberal America. And that's not good. And it's, in anybody's playbook who has, the idea that perhaps democracy and rights and a civilization or a culture that wants its members to all succeed, that wants everybody to really move forward into the future in a positive, productive way. That's not what our culture is these days. So we've got a lot of work to do. Okay. Xenu. What if my body thetans were all friends of mine and little buddies? What? Body thetans are clustered and are, from their point of view, is all imaginary. So I get to say anything I want to about body thetans. But according to my understanding of body thetans, they are basically your prisoner. And you, as the OT, in going into session, wake each one up, rehabilitate them spiritually. And it could be a whole process to do that. And send them on their way. And as far as I can tell, at that point, they fall prey to the whole between lives implant activity of forgetting everything that came, before. And so they're not going to be your little buddies because they're not going to remember you. All right, let's carry on here. What else we got? We answered that one already, and I pretty much agree in terms of the whole predicting where Scientology is going and all that, so I'm not going to repeat what everybody else has already said. Okay, Xenu asks, what do you think about the concept of radical acceptance? I agree in principle with my understanding of radical acceptance being a position or sort of a philosophic position of shit's going to happen and you're just going to have to let it happen because that's what's going to happen regardless of what you think about it, right? In one crude way of putting it. I connect or relate with this, and you've heard me speak recently about Camus, right? And absurdism, right? Sort of recognizing the absurdity of life is I believe, a form of radical acceptance. Excuse me. And as long as nobody's using it in the same way that, radical honesty. I hope you all will check out my podcast on Saturday about that, by the way. It's, quite a crazy thing, that whole radical honesty thing. But anyway, as long as nobody's using it that way, then I don't really have a problem with the concept of it. I think it's useful. Okay. Paula Piccorini, do you think that Scientology contributed to spread the narrative about the American dream, especially among the Latin American public? I mean, Scientology is the embodiment of the perfect society. Oh. Scientology fits into a philosophic mold of, what you might think of as like self-improvement mantras, right? Self-improvement. Like if we did not all think culturally and certainly 1950s America was all about thinking that we can improve our own station, that the class system doesn't have welded, walls and locked doors keeping you mobile, right? Like you can move from one strata of society to another. The American dream is basically a statement of that, from the very classist England, other societies that historically created highly structured class systems and forced their citizens through socioeconomic means and through cultural, social pressures to stay in their lane, stay in your place, know your place, plebe. Like this goes all the way back. I mean, the class system manifests in lots of different ways in lots of different societies. And the dream of the human dream of being able to move beyond your station seems to be historically a relatively new idea. I believe it springs from Enlightenment principles, right? And, Rousseau and, those guys writing about how, the self-actualization, is only possible in a system where you're class mobile. It's kind of hard to self-actualize when you're living in the fucking sewer, in other words, right? Doesn't quite work out that way. And in fact, the entire concept of Maslow's hierarchy of needs comes out of the beginnings of the human potential movement. What are we capable of? What is our potential? Is it more than just being stuck in a feudalistic society? Almost all Western societies have been somewhat feudalistic, if you think about it, right? Serfs and manor lords and that kind of thing, aristocracy ruling us. It's a model we all subscribe to, and I think we take it too far. So, did Scientology contribute to spread that narrative, that kind of narrative, among Latin American the public? Possibly. I hadn't particularly thought about it as spreading that narrative amongst a minority group. I don't think Scientology would exist, though, if people didn't somehow subscribe to the idea that they can self-actualize, they can get better, they can improve their lot. And all you got to do is pay. Just pay us a lot of money and put in the time, be disciplined about it, and you'll become a god, in earlier incarnations of this, as I sit here thinking about it, when you look back to 18th century spiritualism, or you go back in time, way, way back in time, you don't necessarily see people thinking that they were going to live a better life because they were climbing, the Freemason ladder of indoctrination, or they were subscribing to, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn or something, where they were believing in some sort of spiritual transformation or spiritual evolution. It wasn't necessarily about, having that manifest in a rags to riches way. You could feel spiritually aware or alive or whatever while still living in a hovel. So the idea of your spiritual growth manifesting in money or economic, growth or something, that's all very Western. At least as I understand it. So yeah. ASX222, thank you for pointing out things that I can't do anything about. I do appreciate it, but I can't go back and change that, and I'm not going to. So there you go. But I appreciate that. I knew when I was typing that in that I had a little typo. Okay. Xcion also asks, what piece of information in the tech did you find conflicted with each other? Did you call attention to it, and how did it get resolved? Ooh. Obviously, this question is like when I was in Scientology, because I've pointed out tons of contradictions since I left. But okay, here's what I'll say as a general answer rather than trying to dig around in my, treasure chest of memories of Scientology. The classic standard way of dealing with conflicting information in Scientology specifically was putting it in time order, chronological order, and resolving to whatever Hubbard said last. That's the most, that's the thing. Miscavige even said that from the stage one time, that in any situation, maybe it was a staff briefing. I think it was a public event that he actually said that out loud, though, where he said, when you have a chronology, when you put everything in a chronological sequence, then you see an evolution of thought or procedure, right? And or discovery, as they think of it in Scientology. So you would take the latest thing as the thing that is the thing that is right or true. An example might be boil off in Dianetics was thought of as where you're running a Dianetics chain on somebody and they start boiling off. It means they're falling unconscious. They're just passing out in the chair, and they could go to sleep. You can hear them snoring. I mean, they were like full on pass out. And Hubbard had different pieces of advice about how to deal with that. And at first it was you wait it out. And then it was, no, you wake the fucker up, right? You don't let him just sit there sleeping. You're wasting his time and yours. So completely contradictory, but it depends on when you're looking at those pieces of knowledge as to how you as the auditor are going to deal with this pre-clear who's unconscious right in front of you. Also, it might be in the type of process you're running. Maybe in Dianetics, you don't interrupt them and you let them go and run through their crap and sit in the chair for 5 hours and just, cha-ching, 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 because we're just, I'm just sitting here running the process and you're the one paying, right? So you want to lay there asleep the whole time, go right ahead, but, here we go. Whereas maybe there might be, a objectives process you're going to run, and you're trying to walk this person backwards and forwards in the room, and they start passing out on you. Well, it's really, really, really hard, I say from experience, to drag an unconscious pre-clear around the room and make him touch the wall, right? It's really exhausting for the auditor to have to do that, especially, with anybody, but especially with, bigger people, right? So, you just wake their ass up, right? Hey, wake up. You're not slapping them around, but, you don't put up with that. So it might be resolved by the context, right? In Dianetics, you let them sleep, and objective processing, you don't. That's how we would deal with that. Okay. John asks, are you excited about the new Scientology podcast with Casey Kasem's daughter? No, I'm not. Not even a little bit. I wonder if I'm even going to listen to it. I might give it a look when it comes out. Might be interesting to hear how they think people want to hear about Scientology through a podcast. Yeah, I'm interested to see what they're going to do with it, but I am not in any way, shape, or form concerned that it's going to become popular or something. That's a stretch. Okay, X-Scion asks, what did you learn from Scientology? How has it affected you? Well, we've talked about this lots before, but maybe this was meant for one of my guests. I'm not sure. I'm just kind of going down the list now. I learned from Scientology that I learned a lot of things. I was going to say, I learned how easy it can be to lie to people, to deceive them, to prey on their emotional needs, which are not weaknesses. I was going to, the first thing that occurs to me is, oh yeah, how Scientology preys on our weaknesses. And it does, because we do have weaknesses in critical thinking, in emotional intelligence, in gullibility, which goes back to, lack of critical thinking, logical fallacies, right? John mentioned earlier, this sort of just world hypothesis is really a logical fallacy. It's a way of viewing the world that isn't really based on fact. So I suppose you could call them weaknesses, but I don't think about our emotional needs as weaknesses, right? But they are places where we are vulnerable to attack. And so Scientology calls itself the science of certainty. Yeah, it's really the science of uncertainty. It's the science of logical fallacies gone very awry, But I also learned something else in answering this that I think is much, much, much more important to answer. And that is that since leaving Scientology, what that whole thing taught me and continues to teach me every day is how resilient we are. How incredible we are that we can be exposed to such abuse, psychological abuse and physical abuse, for so long, and still have the ability to come back from that and learn and grow and have a life. And I don't know that I can sit here in full confidence and say all of us can do that, but it sure has been flooring. It's been so awe-inspiring to me to watch people come out of those situations and bounce back. Doesn't happen overnight, but it happens. And you can really admire the human spirit watching that. It's easy to get really, really pessimistic about people. Believe me, it is. Watching how they treat one another and abuse one another. And start thinking that's all we do to each other. But it's not. Not by a long shot is it all that we do to each other. And there's a whole other side of the coin that is amazing to see and to be part of, or to help people with, because I never imagine when I'm working with people that I'm the one changing them. They're the ones who are changing them. I just get to be there and, maybe nudge a little bit, but they're the ones who are actually doing all the work. And it's a privilege and an honor in a way to be able to do that with people. And that's how it's affected me, Yeah, that's kind of cool. So thanks for asking me about that, sending me over that way. Okay, John, what do you think about Joy Vila leaving Scientology? I am very, very happy that Joy has left Scientology. I'm always happy when people leave Scientology or any coercive situation. Yeah, that's what I think, right? I am As far as the rest of her beliefs and ideas and goals and all of that, I'm not on board, right? I'm not a conservative. I'm not a Christian. I'm not a Trumpist. That's not, none of that is what's important to me about her. The fact that she came to her senses, so to speak, like we all had to, and got herself out of that situation, says a lot about, about her. So good on her. That's what I have to say about that. All right. Let's see what else we got here. Oh, we got a lot of questions. This is good. All right. Angry Chode. Chris Shelton, do you like Hallmark movies? Are steroids allowed in Scientology? And do you like 90s bands? Okay, little medley here. I do not like Hallmark movies. I think they are the cheesiest. They are the fortune cookies of entertainment, I don't like Hallmark movies. Are steroids allowed in Scientology? That's a good question. Wow. Maybe it would depend on what kind and for what reason. I'll go lowest common denominator here and assume you're asking maybe about like muscle building steroids or something. And there isn't really anything in Scientology against that I can think of right now. I could see it both ways. I could see somebody in the Sea Org getting their panties in a twist about somebody building up their body with steroids. And I could also see somebody just kind of shrugging it off. Well, it's just a body. Who cares, right? I'm just building up my body, right? Yeah, I could. So maybe the purpose for it would depend a little bit on the answer, as opposed to say steroids that somebody might need as an injection in a joint in order to relieve joint pain or muscle pain, right? I understand steroids are used for that. I might be pursuing something like that myself, actually, because my back is, it's bad. So I have hip pain pretty much 24/7. And I'm looking into steroids as maybe a possible solution for that pain, not for the scoliosis. Of course, the steroids aren't going to do anything to straighten my back, but I'll, if I could have something to relieve the pain, I would. And I'm pretty sure that use of steroids in Scientology would be approved. I don't think anybody would have a problem with that necessarily. It's not a drug as such. So yeah, I think that would be the answer. And as far as 90s bands, yeah, I love 90s bands. Absolutely. Yeah, listen to 90s music all the time. Okay. X-Cyan. How does a person who was so badly burned by a cult convinced to return to them? Emotional needs. We will continue repeating this phrase until morale improves. That's how. I mean, it's not about, because the question, of course, sort of is, look, you idiot, how could you not know? How could you not know? Like, these people burned you. You got, you were fried. You were bankrupt. You were made to crawl on the ground and push a peanut down a deck. I mean, you were humiliated. You were devastated. How would you possibly go back to them? None of that matters in the face of emotional needs. It's what drives us. It's what motivates us. It's what makes us think we're good people. It's what gets us along with others. Emotional needs are who we are, right? It's what drives us. Between that and our moral foundations, that's who you are. What you know isn't who you are. In my book, it's what you do with what you know. And what do you do with what you know? You take what you know and you use it to reinforce or drive what you want to do, what your needs drive you to do. Find community, push a purpose or a meaning for your life. My life's purpose is to be the best cricket player in the world. That is what I need. I have an emotional need to be that, to play cricket and play it at the top of the game. One doesn't come to that through learning. One comes to that through feeling, right? And then you use your knowledge to inform your actions as to what you need to do in order to fulfill those needs. And we've all got them. And they are the thing that compel us and impel us through life. So you leave a cult, you get burned. Odds are you're never going back, because not only did you learn a lesson, but you were so overwhelmingly emotionally devastated by the experience. It was so hurtful, so traumatizing. Your brain won't even let you look back there, right? But you give it a little bit of time to let a whole lot of cognitive dissonance resolve all of that trauma in the direction of it was my fault, really? Or some other bullshit stuff that you convince yourself of, or somebody from the cult comes and helps convince you of, playing on your emotional needs. Because you haven't figured out when you left the group that you even have emotional needs, much less what other way is there to fulfill them. You feel purposeless, adrift. Life has no meaning. Was it all for nothing? You know, even sunk cost fallacy features into this, right? No, it couldn't have all been for nothing. I gave so much of my time and my money and my investment. You know, it must have something. I must go back. I can fix it. I can make it better. You know, whatever you tell yourself. And people can convince themselves of anything, you know? I mean, that's how it happens. When it happens, that's how it happens, that kind of thinking. Yeah. All right, let's carry on. Once a witness asks, how many Scientologists are there in Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland? I don't know an exact figure, but I am going to tell you not many. Probably measures in, at most, a couple hundred. Yeah, I don't think there's a lot there. In terms of people who, if you ask them, are you a Scientologist? They go, oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, very few people, a few hundred maybe. I'd be shocked. I'd be surprised if you can show me census information or some other information that that would contradict what I just said, because I'd really just kind of pulled that out of wherever. I'd be interested, but that's my thinking on it, right? Not a lot. Jeremy Dixon, Chris, do you have a favorite moment from the first 500 episodes? Good question. I was thinking about this this week while I was kind of planning and putting things together. There are a couple times where I have given, I'll tell you a type of thing that has been very exciting or interesting and fun for me. When I answer, for the first few years of doing this Q&A show, I tried really hard to not repeat the questions. Because I already answered this question. I don't want to do it again, right? And I could just go look at the earlier stuff. But it was kind of hard to find the earlier answers. And after a while, I was kind of like, yeah, I'll just answer what comes in. And sometimes over the years, my answers would change. Or I could give a lot more information in response to a question because I learned more or realized more about the thing, right? Whether it was, the utility of the comm course, which my answers have very much changed over the years. I used to say, oh yeah, there's some good in it and stuff. Now I'm like, yeah, fuck that. Is there anything good in Scientology? No, there's not. No. It's an easier and probably more accurate answer, right? So 2000, really? UK census. Oh, is that all of UK? Okay. Yeah. All right. I think there's a lot more people in Scientology in England than there are in Wales or Scotland or Northern Ireland. I don't know. But it's not like you could show me a map and I could draw out the different areas really well either. So, okay. Anyway, so getting back to this thing on the questions. Yeah. So I have had a couple times where I've answered questions and given what I thought was a real championship answer, and gave myself a real good attaboy, right? So that's happened a couple times, mostly having to do with my answers on thought reform or Scientology's use of thought reform techniques, or when I talk about how Scientology is very likely one of the most powerful, most invasive forms of thought reform on this planet, right? That's ever existed. I mean, that's a weighty statement. There have been a lot of things done by a lot of people over the millennia that we've been around, crawling around on Earth, that very bad men have done to people to enslave them. It's been some nasty shit. But there are very few things that can match the invasive psychological damage that Scientology can do to a person. It's, and it took me a long while to get my head around that, and really acknowledge I think that's a true statement, So, yeah, so I think those are kind of my favorite moments from what I remember of the time. Okay, I missed that one for Jefferson Hawkins. Sorry about that one, Lupita. Okay. Yes. Okay. Good. It was a good one. Get this up on the screen here. The entire country of Luxembourg. Wow. I've never had a whole country ask me a question before. You recently answered a question by quoting an AI on your phone. Do people doing that risk outsourcing knowledge / morality / judgment to Silicon Valley tech bros? Yes, they do. And that's why you're not going to see me doing that again. I will look stuff up, but I'm not gonna sit here and quote AI to you. No, I'm not going to do that. Again, this is a matter of growth and learning on my part, right? That I would say that. But AI is a tool of ultimate stupidity, really. Not that AI itself is stupid. That's not what I'm saying. The answers it gives you are not stupid. It makes us stupid. It makes us reliant on a form of knowledge gathering that is exclusively built only on what other people have said in the past, synthesized together with no real judgment or decision making as to, real decision making. I'm not, like the way we do it. In what's right or wrong or good or bad about what it is you're being given. You're getting the ultimate in group think in AI answers, because that's how it creates answers, is it synthesizes words. AI doesn't understand words or concepts. That's not what it's doing. It's synthesizing algorithmically, numerically, words and putting them together in a way that we understand, basing it on earlier knowledge that may or may not be true or factual, objectively speaking. And there are way too many of us who don't understand that. So they believe, people use these machines believing that they are talking to something that is thinking the same way they're thinking. And it's not. It is impossible, in other words, where this all goes is that it's impossible for AI to create anything new or original. It can only synthesize. And there are people out there who think and will die on a hill arguing with you about the fact that none of us ever think an original thought. And they are wrong. They could not be more wrong. And probably I'm gonna soapbox for a second because you're giving me the opportunity to. Art is where this is most obvious, or maybe the argument could be made that it would be most obvious. AI will never, ever, 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 ever create original art. Yet it is the art and the artist that create the progress of our civilizations. That's a big, heady, weighty statement, but it's true. Right? Art informs and reacts. Art is reactionary and art is informative. It does both at the same time. Right? So we can react to things with art that are happening, or the circumstances or whatever, but it also informs us of possibilities, of things we hadn't thought of. And here's an easy example, is science fiction, right? Goes all the way back. Jules Verne, first science fiction. Frankenstein, Mary Shelley, first science fiction, right? Way, way back before anybody was doing anything with gene replacement therapy, with building rockets that are going to take us to the moon, with building submarines that are going to take us to the depths of the ocean. Before any of that was how do they put it? A glimmer in the eye, right? Before any of that had any possibility of being real, artists imagined it. And because they imagined it and propagated those imaginative ideas as art, other people were inspired to actually create it. Would we have ever landed on the moon without Mary Shelley and Jules Verne and H.G. Wells? Maybe. But probably not. Because it wouldn't have occurred to anybody to do it. You know? AI will never do that for us. It can't. Much less respond to you like a therapist. I mean, there are people who use AI now for therapy. Please, for God's sake, don't do that. Find another human being. You know, these are the kind of things that 5 years ago I just never even imagined I would have to say out loud, you know. But it's true. People in their desperation for help will turn to a machine for compassion. It's bad, right? I mean, that's pretty bad. So anyway, yeah. So that's not what that is all about. And so, yes, me turning to AI is me being part of that system when I am actually not wanting to be part of that system at all. And so, no, I'm not, so I'm not going to do that. There are things that if you understand machinery, then you use the machine according to its actual use and purpose, and you're fine there, right? If you want to use AI to synthesize information so you can have synthesized information, fine. But don't think it's doing any thinking or telling you anything new or original, because it's not, All right, there's my soapboxing on that. All right, let's carry on here. Ooh, so many questions coming in. All right, let me see if I can speed up here. I'm going to skip that one. Drea2612, have you looked into or followed any of the Lori Daybell trials as far as being involved in a cult or Mormonism? Okay, get that up on the screen. I have followed Lori Daybell's original trial. I didn't. I think there's. I think there's new trials or appeals or something I've been seeing on my feed. But I stopped following that once I realized that Lori Daybell as an individual is insane. She's nuts. Personally, like as an individual, certifiable. She's gone. The cult aspect of that and her involvement with Mormonism and her involvement with, doing what she did is tragic and horrible. But I don't know enough about her pathology to know whether it was the cause of her insanity, but her insanity is evident. My opinion of her insanity. I'm not a clinician, right? And obviously I haven't interviewed her. But when you watch and listen to her speak and hear the things that she has to say and how she has to say it and her utter inability to even understand consequences, much less not take responsibility for them, you understand you're dealing with somebody whose brain is so broken that she can only really be locked up. There isn't really any place safe for her to be other than to be secured from and made separate from rational, sane society. There are plenty of such human beings. They're, for a variety of reasons that we're obviously not going to get into. But yeah, that's that. Once I saw that or kind of thought that to myself and about her, I thought that there wasn't really any further interest in following her case or what and certainly there is no value of any kind in listening to anything she has to say. She's wholly irrational. My thought, my take on that. That's my hot take, right? Okay. See here we got here. Pop this up on the screen. My two Markles. Do you feel like your master's degree has given more legitimacy to your message from outsiders? Asking as I am just now pursuing mine in my 50s, and I'm wondering if it seems to make a positive impact. I think so. There are people who negatively react to me putting MSc after my name and, whatever, kiss my ass. I really don't care. It's my title and I'm taking it. Right. And I worked way too hard for it to just ignore it. Right. I try not to be all grandiose about it, but I want people to know that I'm coming to them from an educated point of view. And I believe there are a lot of people who appreciate that or understand that. And there are some people who just have to play one-upmanship and tell me, that I'm a horrible person for, flaunting my ego, because I earned a degree and let people know I have a degree. So you're going to get, my point being that you're going to get different reactions to being educated. Not everybody thinks being educated is a feature. A lot of people out there these days, are sort of antitrust of, intellectualism or of the academy, right, of academics. There's such a cultural distrust of that, and of course, in a post-truth culture like we live in now, there are too many people who believe that the truth just doesn't exist, doesn't matter, and so your degree is is the equivalent of toilet paper, right? And that's a real shame. I always just kind of think that's ultimately just a shame. I'm not mad about it. I'm just, that sucks, kind of thing. So yeah, so there's that. Let's carry on here. John clarifies later, I think he was asking about the Father's Day protest against Scientology. I really don't have an opinion on it. I'm sorry. I'm so out of the loop on it that I don't know enough to have an opinion. Okay. A6222, hey, what do you know about Buddhism and its traditions that isn't from Hubbard? Why do you think Hubbard had an affinity for Buddhism and the Lord Buddha? Was it Orientalism or something deeper? Okay, so Hubbard rode a lot of hobby horses, a lot of carpets to success, right? Hubbard was trying to glom onto what was popular and what had people's attention. And the melding of Eastern and Western philosophies or ideas has been something that has been very popular in the past when Hubbard was around. And Hubbard kind of jumped onto that bandwagon. It's a bandwagon effect, is how I see it. I don't think Hubbard would have ever brought up Buddhism or mentioned that he traveled in the Orient, or that he eventually stated he was literally the reincarnation of Buddha, and that he was the prophesied Maitreya, which he is not. And Hubbard, of course, had to completely corrupt the prophecy and the whole idea of Maitreya in order to say he was that. So it was just, for Hubbard, the whole Buddhist shtick was a shtick. It was just another way for him to throw words at people, to describe Scientology as a melding of the East and the West. And look at my travels in the East and how, amazing I was when I went to the Buddhist lamaseries and I traveled extensively and slept with nomads in the deserts of Nepal, or whatever bullshit stories he was telling. His personal logs and diaries from that time tell a very different story, by the way. He talked about how the Buddhist monks sounded like croaking frogs, and the only thing wrong with China was there were too many, he had disparaging words for the Chinese, right? Hubbard was, never really, I love this phrase, never met a bigotry he didn't like, right? I'm ripping that off from Bryce from a couple weeks ago in our podcast. That's Hubbard, right? So his affinity for Buddhism, his discussions about it, spring from his very, very, very limited understanding of what he was stealing from Blavatsky and spiritualism, and his understandings of esotericism, Eastern esotericism, and how it informed his magic thinking and philosophies, right? That's my hot take on Hubbard's Buddhism, right? And while I don't pretend, I'm not going to even begin to pretend that I know all about actual Buddhism. What I do know is that there are about 1 million flavors of it, and that there are lots and lots and lots of ways to call yourself a Buddhist, and that the thing that Hubbard nailed, I think, they're pretty much the only factual thing I think he actually had to say about Buddhism was that that Buddhism had denigrated in some ways to a worship of Buddha, and that there would be nobody who would find that funnier or stupider than Gautama Siddhartha Buddha, right? Because that's not what he was about at all. And I many, many decades ago, I read Siddhartha. I liked it. And that's probably a more accurate rendition of what went down than anything Hubbard had to say about it. But there you go. All right, let's see what we got here. There we go. There you are. All right, sometimes I have to play with the scroll bar a little bit here. Sorry for that. All right, Marcello asks, what is a Flag interview? I guess it is just a reg opportunity to sell you on services at Flag. I saw people with a I booked sticker coming out of an event at my local org. Okay. Yeah, it is a sales interview. But here, let me tell you a little bit about Flag real fast, and put it in the context of why it's important in Scientology. So Flag is in Clearwater. The Flag Service Organization is the largest Scientology service organ in the world, and they can deliver everything, all the way up to, but not including OT8. OT8's off on the ship, but everything up to there, Flag can do. So it is a sort of assumed, and Hubbard has promoted it as fact, that people who are trained at FLAG are better trained and more widely trained than any other Scientologist anywhere. So when you get an interview from a technically trained person from FLAG, you're getting the best of the best interviewing you and getting all your information about, your dog, your kid, you, all the things you hate, all the things you love, all the stuff in your life that you want to change. They do these interviews to kind of, break you down and figure out what's wrong with you, right? And this is called an interview, or a DAP interview, or a technical consultation. And this is all done so that they get the data from you as to what you think, just like with the personality test, actually. It's really the personality test drill or thing for Scientologists so that they'll go to FLAG and pay top dollar for their services, because FLAG is also the most expensive Scientology services. Because it's the best, you're paying twice as much. So that's the deal with that. And FLAG sends out every year. They send out a tour of people from FLAG who go around to all the orgs, or a bunch of the orgs in different parts of the world, and do these interviews and hold an event and try to bring people to it so as they can sell them services to do at FLAG. And that's what that's all about. Okay. The entire country of Luxembourg has another question for me. What would you do if you woke up tomorrow, or woke up after death, and found Scientology was real after all? You mean the Mormons didn't get it right? I've thought about this, actually. And the great thing about it is that if it's all true and I'm wrong and Hubbard nailed it, then I get to go do it again. I'll just go pick up another body and I'll show up at an org, and this time, I'll force myself to get through it all. That's pretty much what would happen, because that's what you can do according to Scientology, right? And I'll sort out my SP status if it even comes up, if I even remember it, next lifetime, right? I'm only laughing because, of course, that's impossible. There is no way it's possible that it's true. When you fact check OT3, for example, it's impossible. Not to mention the logical inconsistencies between the OT levels and the lower levels, and the contradictions and everything else. Once you sum total all of it, like when you really get all of it, right? Which I believe I have. It's impossible that it could be true. So there you go. Please let Melissa know that we missed seeing her. Maybe she could pop in sometime. Yeah, if she wants to, I will have her come by. I did invite her to come by today. But the camera is not really her favorite place to be. So that's why. All right. Marcello asks another question. Let's see here. What's your take on responsibility versus blame? The mind trick seems to be to attribute responsibility, but let the person self-attribute the blame. Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. I did a podcast on this, actually, maybe a year ago, a few months ago, which you can look up, because I talked a bit about this. And the bottom line is that responsibility is not blame. Responsibility is, you break the word down, and it is the ability to respond. What can you respond to? That's what you are responsible for. The things you're able to respond to. And there are far, maybe fix a few more fars in there. There are far too many people, most people, who seem to have this very, very confused with guilt and blame. And they will blame themselves or blame other people for things that they never could have had any power to respond to in any way or do anything about, in other words. And if you couldn't have done anything about it, then you can't be responsible for it. That's the whole trick that Scientology and Hubbard and every cult guru use, from Hubbard to Mary Baker Eddy to Werner Erhard to Keith Raniere. Every one of these fuckers twists responsibility very specifically. They went way out of their way to twist responsibility around, to make it some spiritual attribute you're supposed to have, where you are just ultimately responsible for things that you could never be responsible for. And then, of course, the trick, as you say in your question, is to get people to believe that they could have been responsible, that they could have responded, they could have done something about it. You couldn't. You know, there's lots and lots and lots of things in your life that you very, very much are responsible for. What you do when you get up in the morning, that's kind of on you. What you do when somebody presents to you and says things to you and how you respond to them, right? That you're responsible for that. The things you can choose, in other words, right? But we really take it upon ourselves to have an inflated view of our own ability, potential. You know, this is sort of, again, that dark side of the human potential movement attitude, right? If you have infinite potential, then that means you have infinite responsibility, right? And you don't have infinite potential. So therefore, you know, you don't have infinite responsibility, but you can be made to believe you do and take it on yourself. And down that road, there be dragons. Okay, John O asks, how many indie Scientologists do you think there are in America? Few hundred at most. ASEX222, when you were an FSM trying to recover public, what were the most common reasons they'd fallen off lines? Actually leaving due to cost, or learning about Hubbard, or just boredom, being over it? No, usually, okay. When I was recovering people, and it wasn't as an FSM, I was a staff member recovering people. I didn't do recoveries as a public Scientologist, which is what an FSM is. But there were such a variety of reasons. The ones that I connected with, the main reason in those people that I could get in front of and talk to was they got fucked with somehow. Right? The org screwed them over. They ripped them off. They promised something they didn't deliver. Yeah. Usually multiple times too. It wasn't just one incident. It would build up with the person, and then they were just like, okay, fuck it, I'm out of here. Right? It was usually along those lines. There were a couple times when I would call up somebody or knock on their door and they'd just be like, oh man, I hadn't thought about that in years, right? But the thing that separated them from Scientology, as I want to say, as I say a lot, right, is some kind of moral outrage that is undeniable and irrefutable, right? Like you just can't put up with it anymore. You can't cognitive dissonance it away. You can't deny it. It happened, right? They cheated you out of the money. They lied to you. They told you to separate from your mom. And you're like, I love my mom. Yeah, well, your mom sucks, right? Well, no, you suck and I'm out of here. Like that kind of a moral outrage is what underlies the emotional needs, right? This is my modeling of people. This is purely my thing. I've not read this anywhere. Nobody told me this. My thinking of what drives us is, you know, our knowledge set for sure, our cultural, our social patterns, our emotional needs underlie that. They are more fundamental and more powerful and more motivational to us. And under that, is our morality, our sense of right and wrong and good and bad. That's the bottom line layer of what drives us. And when you morally outrage someone, it fundamentally changes your relationship, right? Because they can't unsee it, right? Or they can't not, they can't deny that outrage happened. That's kind of how I put it together. So that's and that proves out with my experiences, right? I mean, in terms of what I've experienced of how people leave cults. I mean, I've talked to a lot of people over the years who have left a lot of different kind of cults, and pretty much, it's not everybody. Not everybody leaves because of a moral outrage. But if you're looking for, what does it take? What snaps people? What gets them to like, oh my God, moral outrage. Yeah. All right. Okay, good. The entire country of Luxembourg. The whiff you get when opening vented parcels is worse than the whiff from eBay parcels. Why are vented so... Okay, I have no idea. That's what I get for not reading these things first. All right. Damn, we've been at it for a while. We're going to have to wrap up pretty soon, but I'm going to try to finish a few more of these. Jono asks, that interview created the Dynamics ads. Yeah, Jeff Hawkins, did you feel uncomfortable with how proud he was of its success? Well, you're speaking of Jefferson Hawkins, and no, I'm not uncomfortable with Jeff or how proud he was of his work. We were all proud of our work in the cult. The work wasn't the problem, and our pride in our work isn't the problem. To a degree, obviously, right? If you're taking pride in hurting people and you're hurting people, that's a whole different conversation, and that's coming from a whole different headspace. But I did plenty of work in Scientology that I'm proud of. Hell, I'm proud I finished the goddamn RPF. It was the hardest fucking thing I ever had to do in my life, and I survived it. And I should have a t-shirt. They should have given me a t-shirt, because that was a motherfucker to survive, and not everybody did. And it's I've said every time I've brought this up, I've said it's a perverse kind of pride. I get it. But in and of itself, I proved things to myself about what I'm capable of. And I can be one very strong, very persevering motherfucker if I am motivated to be that way, right? And that's what the RPF proved to me, is I can fucking endure walking on goddamn glass. If the goal is strong enough that I want that, I can do it. And that is a good thing to know about yourself. You learn something about your character and that kind of thing, and the kind of shit you have to endure in cults. And so Jeff Hawkins put together a very, very successful marketing campaign. The fact that it had to do with Dianetics doesn't take away from the fact that he created a fucking brilliant marketing campaign that hit like a bomb. He did, and he should be proud of that. So no, I wasn't uncomfortable about that. Of course, the fact that it promoted Dianetics sucks. And the fact that it made it a bestseller again, not great, right? But the work itself, you can separate from that, and you can have rightful pride in the work without taking a perverse pride in selling Dianetics books. And I think that separation is a sensible thing to do. That's my take. Maybe some people will disagree with me, but I think that's the case. Okay. Radiate life. Okay. Radiate life community, celebrate life, highs and lows. What helped you rebuild trust in your own inner knowledge, inner knowing, after being trained to doubt it? I think this answer may surprise some of you. The thing that helped me rebuild trust in myself was forgiving myself. Yeah. I don't think it's a whole lot different from how we rebuild trust in each other, right? We learn, we empathize, we, for ourselves, for myself, looking inward and having those internal conversations and thinking about what motivated me and why I did what I did in all kinds of circumstances, right? Scientology. And outside of Scientology too. Sometimes we have blow-ups and we have things we do and we're like, God damn, did I do that? Yeah, you did. Oof, right? And having to learn, well, okay, I don't want to do that again. It's not enough to just tell myself that and hope that I don't. I want to know why. What motivated me to do that? Right? That horrible thing, whether it was losing my shit on somebody or whether it was, selling them Scientology. I mean, whatever. We all have regrets, right? We have things we do and we go, fuck, that's really screwed up. How can I know I won't do that again? That's trust. Well, for me, my answer to how I know I'm not going to do that again or how I'm going to be better able to regulate myself, because it's not binary. Sometimes it's a gradual process. You have to mess up a few times before you learn the lesson or before you learn to get to a place where you don't have to repeat that behavior. I think that demands introspection. I think that demands learning, right? That's what growth is to me. And once you achieve that and you kind of can accept that in yourself, you go, oh, okay, well, I'm not going to hold my past bullshit against myself now because I know better. And I know I'm not going to do that again. Or if I end up doing that again, it'll be for some reason that is not yet inspected. There's something more to this, right? And sometimes that's why it's a gradual process, because it's not just one thing that causes you to lose your shit or lose your cool or sell people Scientology, right? It's a whole bunch of stuff. It's a pile of stuff. And you can only do one onion layer at a time. You can't just crack the onion. Oh, that's what it was all about. Our brain, it just doesn't work that way. I've never ever seen anybody work it that way. That's why I say that. And nobody does that. It's layer after layer after layer. And giving yourself a little grace, for lack of a better word, right? Like giving yourself a little bit of, okay, yeah, I screwed up. I'm human. Maybe I can do better next time. And then forgiving myself for the past, so that it's not just some albatross that I'm keeping around my neck, That's how I'd put all that. Okay, cool. All right, this will be the last one. So let me take a look through these here. Okay. Sorry, guys. I'm just reading through here. Okay, I will take one of these. I'll take this one. The carrot that Luchenko gave to Siegel. Would Scientology allow someone on antidepressants to join? What about Mormonism? Scientology will demand that you get off the antidepressants, preferably cold turkey, but one way or another, hook or by crook, you got to get off of them. You can't do Scientology services, and you especially can't do Scientology auditing while you're on any kind of antidepressant. They're just not going to let you go there. The day that changes, somebody needs to let me know, but that's about as rock solid of an absolute in Scientology as I can think of. As far as Mormonism goes, I think you can certainly be a Mormon and be on antidepressants. Absolutely, you can. Yeah, there's tons of Mormons on tons of drugs. Yeah, so, all right, there you go. Okay, got to wrap up now. Damn, we did a show, huh? Thanks everybody for joining me. Let me turn that off if I can. All right. Sorry for any ups and downs on the show. I hope it all works out as far as all the volume and everything. I'll have to review the video after this show is over and I get finished recording with Tony. I'm going to go on with Tony in a little bit and record our Monday show. So my day is not over quite yet. But I very, very much want to thank all of you who came along for the ride today and have been along for the ride with me all this time. 500 episodes is not a small accomplishment, and I haven't really gave myself a whole lot of ego boosts here today because of some of the technical crap. But regardless of any of that, I'm so happy to be able to do this work, share my thoughts with you guys, share my knowledge and education with you, and I definitely intend on continuing. There's no real end in sight. YouTube has changed a lot in the last 10 years since I've been on this thing, and not for the better. And I don't know how long YouTube is going to be my platform of choice. I'm not leaving next week or anything. Don't worry about any of that. But I just don't know that this is, I would say, and let's do another 500, but I don't know if that's what's going to happen. YouTube is just kind of a horrible place to try to consume content now, unless you pay them tons of money. And that kind of sucks. I've always put this work out to you guys for free. I've never hidden things behind a paywall. I am fan supported this whole time. You guys have been what has allowed me to have this job. And I can't even begin to express how thankful I am to you for that. Please continue. And if you find, this stuff useful and what I put out useful or informative, please support me because it is on you guys. I don't have some, patron, sending me a check every month, right? It's you guys. So thank you again. And anyway, we will continue. I've got, I almost went live twice this last week. There are things I definitely want to get out, soon. So you're going to hear some stuff from me, and in some bonus episodes, I think I'll probably be doing some of that in the next few weeks, some Scientology related stuff. So that'll be kind of fun. I got this whole thing on Tom Cruise I'd kind of like to do. I find him an ironic genius, Jesus figure. And there were some other things worth talking about too. So we'll get that out there. But anyway, thanks for coming along with me on the ride. I'll see you guys soon.